we'll wait for exactly the top of the hour.
Hi, Michelle. Great to see you.
Hey, good morning. It is good afternoon. Good to see you. So good morning, afternoon, evening, and late night to you from wherever you're patching in. We welcome you to ISSIP's event series exploring AI challenges to global democracy. I'm Michelle Carroll, Executive Director of the International Society of Service Innovation Professionals, or ISSIP, and it is my pleasure to work with these two highly esteemed ISSIP ambassadors on this three-event series. Kazuyoshi Shimada-san of Japan Science and Technology was director of their Washington, D.C. office for the past 3 years until just recently moved back to Japan to manage the Office for Diversity and Inclusiveness at JST. Kazuo has a passion for democracy, and when this year opened and we realized more than half the world's population would be holding major elections, we thought immediately of Kazu, who generously agreed to moderate and bring in the perspectives of Japanese scientists and experts researching and exploring these issues. So we thank you, Kazu-san. And Christine Leitner, a longtime ISSIP ambassador, she is a conference chair for the HSSE, Human Side of Service Engineering Conference. And Christine is the director, a senior advisor and co-founder of the Center for Economic and Public Administration. Her focus is on innovation programs. And she's also, since 2013, served as senior policy advisor to the Austrian government's Ministry of Economic Affairs, now Ministry of Labor and Economy. So both of these leaders bring so much expertise and capability. It's just been a pleasure, and you'll see why very shortly. And we all want to thank Jim Spoor, board director and co-founder of ISSIP, for the support he's given in helping identify great speakers, thinking through flow, and he's manning the chat today. We encourage you to use the chat, please, to ask questions. You'll see there is time for Q&A after each major section of the agenda. And please mute. If you're not the speaker on screen, we'd appreciate you muting because we are recording this session. So again, welcome. Here's our plan for our 90 minutes together. This event is slightly different. I'll share from the other two in the series. The first and third events are panel discussions, and today has that hour-long panel discussion. And I'm going to share the preliminary survey findings of the survey currently in the field. And then our moderators will frame the conversation, bridging a bit from the first session to today's conversation and put it in context. And then we're going to have a keynote address from Giselle Mota of ADP and First. And that's about that drilling down a bit onto the positive side of possible AI impacts to global democracy, because the media does a great job presenting that there are threats, and indeed there are, and they're serious. And there are positive possibilities that are talked about less, we think. So exploring and doing a deeper dive on that today, as well as then we move to our panel perspectives, where we have Lee Rainey, Ignacio Criado, Jeffrey Borick, and Professor Ito representing academic and industry, NGO perspectives across the continents on the topic today. The keynote address is about 15 minutes with Q&A after, and each of our panelists has about 7 minutes, which should allow for a good 20-minute block of moderated discussion and dialogue on the topic. And that's it. So let me share with you, we have a survey currently out in the field, and actually that link will be in chat at some point soon if it isn't already. If you've not already filled it out, please do. It's very short, 4 questions. And what the extended ISSIP community is saying to us now, thinking globally, they're thinking, you're thinking, that AI presents, more than half of you think, more equal opportunity, basically that AI presents equal opportunity and threat for global democracy. though since June, we had 30 responses then, we have about 61 now. I summarized here at 50. 50 responses in, it's still more than half see equal threat and opportunity, but positive is gaining in visibility a bit. Looking at threats, by far, 76% of respondents see bad actor manipulation as the most threat to global democracy presented by AI. And on the positive side, still a very varied pie of possibility, and now enhanced access and participation in elections and process automation, kind of gearing up equally to be half of the greatest opportunity. We'll hear more about that today. The third of our 4 questions, is please provide your own position statement on the topic. And where Kazu has generously agreed to lead production, just pulling together the thoughts and themes of this event series and what's been shared into a summary white paper on the topic. And we welcome inclusion of your position statement, which we'll pull from the survey. So please complete the survey if you haven't already. We're going to leave it in the field up until our concluding event, September. So with that, let me make sure we've covered all the basics. I mentioned that it is a 3-event series. So we opened in June, and we are here today with the opportunity and progress toward inclusion. And we'll have a 3rd event, September 25th, where we'll look at, so then given themes raised, what are the next steps? What should we do? What needs to be researched? So that's where we are. And with that, let me turn it over to Kazu to frame today's conversation.
Thank you, Michelle. First, good evening, good morning, and good afternoon. I summarize the first session we had on July 21st. At the first session, we captured the rough bird's eye view map of the benefits and risks for the AI for our democracy with some examples. The activities we are expecting can be categorized into 4 quadrants, as you are looking at on the screen, and they are consisted of countermeasures on the risks of present and future AI, and developments of benefits of present and future AI. We're going to say distinguish the present issues and future issues. And today we discuss the major challenges we are going to face when we utilize AI, exploring the democratic opportunities throughout the 4 quadrants. The major challenges identified will direct the 3rd session to discuss the theme of research, development, and funding priorities. That's my very brief summarize and bridging from the 1st session to today's session. I will explain a little more about the panel discussion, but Christine, please give your words about your expectations and your visions on today's discussion.
Thank you so much, Kazu, and thank you, Michelle, for the nice introduction. I'm really looking forward to the keynote and to the panel, and thanks to all of you for joining. Very briefly, you've summarized so nicely, Kazu. Just want to add from my perspective, I mentioned it last time that I'm keen on, looking for a new narrative, if you will, for AI and democracy, impact of democracy in a very polarized discussion we're seeing at the moment on risks and harms, but also benefits. So that's what I'm looking for. And with your input, maybe also we'll be able to focus our research agendas for ISSIP network and for the HSSE community. Now, from my point of view, there are 2 aspects I would like to highlight. One is the tensions, as we would call it in EU talk, tensions between, let's say, inclusion and manipulation on the one hand, but also convenience versus freedom versus individual responsibility. And I'm particularly interested also in where policy intervention and regulation should come in, and also what role education plays in that whole process. So I'm really looking forward to the discussions today and further input from all our distinguished experts. Thank you so much, Kazu. Over to you again.
So Elva, and actually, so these were our speakers at the first session. So I want to say a word about Giselle Mota before she takes the floor. Giselle is a global speaker who's been featured in TED Talks, Forbes, NASDAQ, Yahoo News, PBS, Vogue. She's guest lectured at universities that include MIT, Purdue, the AI School of Paris, University of Washington, to name a few. She's an inclusive futurist, an innovative thought leader. Giselle built and leads the practice of inclusion and equity throughout a 200 plus product portfolio at as chief of product inclusion at ADP, which is a $15 billion plus American software and services provider. She's been named to the top 100 in HR and a future of work thought leader. Giselle's also the creator of Nifty Collective by Versed, which focuses on bringing disability inclusion into Web3, XR, and the metaverse. For this work, Versed is the 2024 winner of ISSIP's Excellence in Service Innovation Award for Impact to Society. As founder of Versed, an inclusive innovation and strategic ventures consultancy, Giselle has worked with NASA, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and other organizations on inclusive innovation and emerging tech projects. We are keen to hear her take on possible AI impacts for global democracy and how she says AI is paving the way toward global considerations of humanity and their freedoms by design. So with that, Giselle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad to be here today. I will tell you that I'm just getting back from a conference in Houston, Texas. This morning, I just got back. So you're catching me fresh. I was talking about, it was a conference called Black is Tech. And I was talking about generative AI and how we can really design with a keen focus on certain communities in mind. So I'm going to use some of that in today's talk. So let's get right into it. I want to set the stage first and share with you on our next slide that you've probably been seeing lots of headlines around generative AI and what is going on in this area. We've heard the risks. We've heard how certain countries, the legislation is being moved towards creating guidelines and guardrails around responsible, ethical, inclusive, you name it, these type of adjectives around generative AI. So we have opportunities to really take AI and think about how can we make it for good? How can we design it for good? So I want to give you an example of a company that you may have used and a product that you may have used as well. And we're going to talk about the product and then get into the AI aspect of it. So let's go to this next slide. We're going to see an example. A mobile phone company has been awarded the best in its type to take the best pixelated pictures. So think of, you want to take a picture of a bird, of a sunset, of a person, and you want to get the right pixelization because you want to see the vibrancy of those colors and the details. And this organization was able to take pictures and learn from photographers who specialize in taking pictures of people of color, whether they're Asian or whether they're Latino or whether they're Black, whatever the case is. They were able to see skin tone and not overly lighten or overly darken people, as is the history of photography. Now, let me give you a quick history lesson and tell you why I'm talking about this. So quick story time. So with Kodak in the 1950s, when Kodak came out, they came out with something called the Shirley card. The Shirley card was an individual who was used as an example of being like what it looks like to be great as a photograph. Shirley, however, and all of the photography and the lighting were calibrated to Shirley. Shirley was a white woman, so a person of lower melanated skin tone. And so with that being said, every photograph of anyone who was a little darker or had more melanated skin tone would come out too dark or too light. And so that was a practice that was done for quite a few years until engineers at Kodak decided that they needed to change the way the technology was set up. I say that to say that in today's world of photography, a lot of the digital photography has still kept some of that notion of like the Shirley card, and it kind of infiltrated into pixelization and digitization of photography until this company did something different. And what they did is that they took a group of researchers, they learned from photographers and their specialty, and they started to embed that into the design and even at a data level, and how they would calibrate the software to make sure that it was showing the correct pixelization. When they were able to put this out into the world, it showed that it was one of the best awarded cameras. However, next slide shows that when they went to social media with this, people were up in arms. Some people were saying, why does a company that does, mobile phones have to be talking about race and color and skin tone? Why does everything have to be about this? And it wasn't until this individual on the screen, which is a National Football League player, the football game in the United States, was able to put his picture among two colleagues. I don't know if you could see it. You might have to squint a little bit on the screen, but Prince is in between two colleagues. They happen to be also white men or men who have lower melanated skin tones. He's in the middle and his arms are around them and he's smiling. He says in the caption on his social media, I promise you I'm in this picture, with two little faces that are grimacing with emoticons. It wasn't until he came to social media and was able to share this that people started to realize, oh, photography should be more inclusive in how it's calibrated and designed so that people will show up in their true self. And this is the same thing that happens with generative AI today, where now this company, in fact, because they were able to do this, now you're able to go, we'll look on the next slide on how this works. And you're able to go online, search for, let's say, a bridal makeup look. And with their research, they're able to have artificial intelligence bring your design. Let's say that you show a photograph of yourself, you show it to this screen, it picks up your skin tone and it'll give you shades for bridal makeup or any kind of, swatches of colors that would look good against your skin tone, because it's understanding correctly what skin tones are looking like, what would match it, etc. So they're now being able to affect searches and affect even later on how their algorithms are working around generative AI and the outputs that are presented around skin tone. It's very interesting. Look it up later if you get a chance. This was the Google products and the skin tone whole scale project that they did around this. Now let's bring it back a little bit more into this democratization. And I want to tell you, what are the opportunities? There's 3 areas of opportunity that I want to consider. Let's go to the next slide. There was a study done by McKinsey. It was a research report, and it talked about it was looking at the Black communities, and it was saying, what is the impact of generative AI on Black communities? Now, I say Black communities, that was their research report, but insert anything. And you could literally say, what is the impact of generative AI on people with disabilities, on people who have neurodiversities, on genders, on you name it, people of different socioeconomic backgrounds, name it. And so with this in mind, they started to look at different areas and things from finances to education to the workforce, and being able to bring up what are some opportunities. And I wanted to discuss that with you as well. Think about opportunities with me for a moment. Policies can be structured and improved. Voting can be improved upon and be influenced by generative AI. And I'm going to tell you how in a second with an example, as well as workforce decisions. And when you think about the opportunity to take something as simple as linguistics or something like the diversity of semantics embedded into generative AI, you can think about being able to understand how different people speak about a thing and be able to embed that into natural language processing and sentiment analysis to truly now understand what someone is trying to say. Now, I don't know about you, but if you've ever had a chance to use like Alexa or Siri or something like that, maybe you have found that it doesn't really have a context. If you're not an English native speaker and you go between bilingual, you might not find that it has the context to understand you. For example, I speak Spanish, I'm Dominican, and you might be able to say, Alexa, I'm gonna say this in Spanish, but I'm gonna in English. I'm gonna do Spanglish for you. But Alexa, turn on the stove for me as I cook the rice, or put up the rice for me. So Alexa, turn on the stove so that I can make me arroz, right? And so in an English context, Alexa kind of doesn't understand that. In fact, Alexa, given certain people's names, like Keisha, spelled Kisha, which is a friend of mine, give it that name, and that would not be pronounced correctly. Alexa would say, "Hi, Keisha. Hello, Keisha." Keisha, my friend, actually has to go into Alexa and program it with a phonetic spelling so that Alexa can say her name appropriately. Because this type of linguistic and semantic detail is not embedded yet into tools that are generating voice and sentiment and all these types of things, whether it's a voice assistant or otherwise. And so I want to kind of bring a more somber tone to this, but I'm going to bring us back out. You probably heard in the news in the United States that there was a woman who dealt with mental health issues. Her name was Sonia Massey. And Sonia Massey said, she was a Black woman, and she said a few things. She said, in her interaction with the police that ended up in her shooting with the police, she said a phrase, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." Now, that phrase, understood in the context of an African-American culture or even a Christian culture or whatever that may be, they very much understand what that means. It is not threatening. It is more said and used when you disagree with something, when you don't quite like something, you could say that kind of terminology in that context. But to the police officer at that time, it was taken as an affront, as something to be threatened by. And that phrase out of that young woman's mouth led to her death, because that police officer said that he was threatened in his life by that phrase, and he shot her several times. And so right now he's going through, he has been already gone through the legal and the judicial system here in the United States, and he's having to serve time because of that issue. Now, I say that because generative AI is also being used as a use case and can be towards training. Imagine generative AI training police and mental health professionals and even interviewers at a workplace or customer service associates to understand the semantics and linguistics of what someone is trying to say according to their culture. And that way, this miscommunication and misunderstanding can be so mitigated to where a life can be saved. Someone can get the assistance that they truly need, and people will be able to interact better that way. What a great opportunity to be able to create policies in government, to be able to lead towards better voting, to be able to lead to better workplace opportunities by understanding what people are saying. So something so simple. Another opportunity is through economics. There's an opportunity for a historical and systemic context to be embedded into design. Now, generative AI for analysis has been used in urban planning, and they're trying to take generative AI and analyze cities and data and the movement and history of all these things, the history of redlining, to understand how things have been divided in certain sectors to keep certain people away and certain people in because of their socioeconomics, to understand urban blight, the decay of a city, and what led to those factors, and what is the background of that. And in order to have true impact in that area, in our democracy, be able to truly make changes in urban planning and housing and developments, imagine the opportunity to take representative data and be able to create unbiased data and lead to something towards the development of cities, the development of infrastructure of places. Another one that I want to share quickly is a little different, but it has to do with infrastructure as well and the environment. Think about how much energy it takes to create generative AI, the amount of water and the amount of electricity that is used. And I don't know if you know this, but multi-billion-dollar data centers are being created as we speak. So Microsoft, Google have been in works with the government, even here in the United States, to create data centers in places that have traditionally had a big disparity among even like social classes, races, ethnicities. One of those is in Northern Virginia, which today is primarily about 50% white in population. Another one, is in Wisconsin, which is 86% white in population and demographics. And when I say this, I bring this up because there are also more affluent areas in some of these areas. And historically, people have been kind of pushed out into the peripheral in places. And the water supply is so poor in some of these areas for the regular common person that there's issues, of course, with droughts and things in these areas, but issues that people can be contaminated with E. coli of the water that they are trying to source. But what would happen then with the water sources that are being used, maybe taken away from the people who really need it and being poured into these data centers to contribute to, generating generative AI? And so there's an opportunity to take pause and really think about, as we create generative AI, how do we take in the context, the socioeconomics, the history, what's going on with the people, the environment, and really start asking questions in the planning and the designing of all of these things. So let's go to the next slide. And I want to give you 3 key areas where I think we also have some areas of opportunity. So one is inclusion and representation. On the screen, you're going to see a few things. And I want to say that it's so great and that we have companies like OpenAI, who's here on the screen now, that you can see a statement that they themselves say, we need to make this AI representative of all types of people. We need to consider this. This is OpenAI, the foundation of a lot of things that are being built and developed in generative AI. ML Commons is another organization that I'm a part of, and I help come together, and we think with a working group, and we consider things like prompting and what needs to be considered to be more inclusive with training data. There are many more organizations that are doing things like auditing for bias, and they're training and adding input. One organization I want to draw your attention to on the screen is called Chat Black GPT. Chat Black GPT. This is made by Aaron Reddick. Aaron Reddick put together this output of generative AI that has a Black context in mind. And remember what I said, I'm using this as an example, but it could be neurodiversity, disability, gender, socioeconomics. In this case, it happens to be Black, right? So why, and how interesting this is. When you're able to chat with this, you're able to get outputs that relate to cultural and societal information that can influence even how people perhaps make voting decisions and get access to information. They can make policy decisions. Things can change when you start getting the real context of what's happening. By the way, really quick, I'm sure you've heard of the story of Google with Gemini and how maybe they overcorrected their generative AI output. But I have to tell you a secret. I got to tell you something. So in this case, even though a lot of people were up in arms about how when you asked it to show you a picture of the founding fathers or a Viking or a Pope in its generative images, that it showed you like Black people and Asians and all that, I gotta tell you, in history, truly speaking, there were popes of color. There were popes who came from North Africa at some point in history. Look this up. There were Vikings of color. There was different people who were represented in different spaces. Now, did they do a little too much in their design and overstretch it? Yes, I do believe so. But we also have to be very careful to really understand the history that sometimes has been redacted. In fact, I don't know if you know, historically speaking, if you were to ask Gen AI today to tell you about like the roots of perhaps tango in Argentina or the gaucho culture of the cowboys in Argentina, and even the history, you're gonna get a very non-colorful context of what the country was. But since before the 1800s, there was a presence of African culture that influenced even tango and influenced a lot of things inside of a country like Argentina, who today is predominantly white. So I wanted to share that with you, because if we don't have these historical contexts, we lose that even in the outputs of generative AI. And we have an opportunity here to add a lens of inclusion on how generative AI is trained, the outputs they create, and then empowering a true representation for people to make informed decisions and lead them to better education in our democracy. Freedom without true knowledge is not really freedom, right? Let's go to the next slide, and I'll be wrapping up shortly here. 2 other areas have to do with explainability and democratization. So I love this one because creating freedoms through access to spaces is important, because knowledge previously and in a lot of spaces gets gate kept. You got people that have access to knowledge, you have people who don't. Sam Altman created this tool or helped fund this tool that allows parents to get access to information about parental leave, because usually there are such such amounts of data, such amounts of information that are hard to access for someone to actually go on parental leave. This company is making it easy and accessible in people's hands. Another example is in rural India, business owners and entrepreneurs now have access in their fingertips to business information and processes that they have to do that normally they probably would have gone to business school to understand. And now generative AI is creating. Also, MasterCard created this partnership with minority kind of like influences and information so that minority-owned small businesses would also get access to information at the palm of their hands. These are opportunities to continue to think of and support use cases that we can do this, to support these use cases in startups and opportunities across all industries to make pathways for success and pathways to access information. So we won't gatekeep anymore. Okay, and as I close up, I do want to share this final thought, which is around data governance and data agency. I encourage all of you, and please keep me to my time in the chat. Let me make sure where I'm at here. But there is a documentary by Dr. Joy Buluwami. She is an MIT professor, and she came up with this documentary called Coded Bias. It's on Netflix. Please take a look at it if you haven't already. There are freedoms that we can really think about through one's data governance and the agency of our data and what is happening. I don't know if you've heard, but recently in the UK, they were using public transit and they were taking the faces of individuals and kind of using and selling that information. But when people were just kind of taking their public transit. So that's a little scary of those kind of things that are happening. But the Algorithmic Justice League by Joy Buluwami is a great opportunity for us to get involved with and for anyone to get involved with these types of organizations. Again, the Algorithmic Justice League, you can support it with donation or you can support by giving feedback. But basically, they're making sure that the airports around the world and that public transit, et cetera, are not using things like facial recognition data to be sold to third parties in any way. And that the same practice, by the way, during the movements around the world around Black Lives Matters, when people were demonstrating and protesting, a lot of people's faces were getting sent without their consent and knowledge to police departments around the world. And then social media monitoring and policing, violation of the First Amendment rights were taking place. We have an opportunity to make a difference here by continuing to invest and be a part of leagues and movements to address these underlying systemic issues and really help people's freedoms not be impacted in a negative way this way. So there's so much more I can say, but I will not continue going on and on here. I hope you got something good out of this. This is not all doom and gloom at all. We have an opportunity to support, to ask questions, to influence legislation, to raise our voices and say, hey, things need to be more representative, things need to change. We can do that. Now, if you're working on a product or you have some kind of idea of ways in which you want to make something reach more people and make it more inclusive, part of what I do with Versed is exactly that. And I'm happy to help and partner with you and collaborate with you on anything. So I'll pause here. I'll stop, give it back to Michelle. Thank you for your attention. And I'd love any comments or questions that you have.
Thank you, Giselle. I think no one wanted to stop you from a minute or two over, judging by the chat. We did have one question from Dawn Rennick. What might you recommend for people to read with regard to design justice?
Yes, definitely go to Algorithmic Justice League and you're going to find great resources around this. Dr. Joy Buluwami is a great resource. As well, Ruha Benjamin has created a lot of great text and books and information around these topics as well, all around inclusive design and how we can really impact that in AI systems.
Awesome. Was there another question? Ray had one.
Yes, thank you. Giselle, I really enjoyed your talk, and I really think you've pointed out some very important aspects of the challenges with AI and also the opportunities. The coded bias slide you shared just in one of the last ones, I think is important. But I want to come back to one of your earlier points about the issues of access, because to me, fundamentally, AI is powerful, but of course, if people don't have access to it, if they can't afford it, then that opportunity is lost to them. And we've had this problem with digital technology ever since the early days of personal computers. So those who had the money could buy one, those who didn't, well, go to a library maybe. And AI, of course, does have paywalls that are emerging, and they will continue to emerge. But what about all of humanity, as opposed to just the people with money? So what would you suggest are ways of minimizing those paywalls?
I'd say there are things that are being done today in terms of even the example I gave around Black GPT. Right now, a lot of startups and people who are doing these things are creating like open access to users to give feedback and inputs. I think right now it's a matter of trying to give feedback, give inputs, maybe even help think about ways in which these organizations can be funded through other means of capital, so that they won't be creating these price points that are impossible to enter into and reach into for the regular user. It's a great point, and something that I want to kind of take back and think a little bit more, Ray, but I'll think about that. And another one is there are open source opportunities today around Gen AI. And I think even just being able to feed into that open source community and share those opportunities for people like myself and others, representative voices, to weigh in, have access, play in these areas, give their feedback, is a great way to get access from the beginning.
And I guess
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray, and thank everyone. Thank you, Giselle, for sharing your perspectives with us. We have to wrap, and I don't think we really want to go ahead and give on a full hour of time with our panel. But this final slide, y'all, what I heard her say was, be active and voice our concerns and say that we want it changed. And kind of like a speech many of us saw last night, do something. With that, Giselle has to leave us. We thank you very much for your time and perspective, and her slides will be available after, as well as this recording. So thanks, Giselle. And with that, let me turn it over to Kazu and Christine to introduce the panel. I think Kazu first to frame the conversation.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Christoph, did you want to ask question to Giselle, or do you have any short comments?
Yes, but it's probably too late. I wanted to ask her about the language module problems, that are less intensive at the moment on the English language modules, because all these AI and ChatGPT stuff has to do with language modules. And the language modules are, of course, much worse in languages that are not so often used as English. So a lot of these things have been improved now on the English and American side, but in Europe we are still struggling with poor language modules. And I wanted to ask her if there is some hope that this is going to be improved in the near future. So, but she's gone now, so maybe this is something that can be of interest also for other people.
Okay. I share your concern as a Japanese people, and I will take your thoughts in the white paper. Thank you for a comment. And okay, so Giselle's talk provided a kind of what can I say, positive attitudes to have the lens of inclusion and to see the issues of AI on democracy. So it was very inspiring and encouraging comment speech. And today we would like to discuss more about that, not only from the user side but also the provider side. We discussed the major challenges we are going to face when we utilize AI, exploring the democratic opportunity. The major challenges identified will direct the session. And I asked panelists to share their perspectives on the positive and the possible on democracy enabled by AI for 7 minutes each. I would like to keep the time. And there's a mixture of user and provider perspectives, as well as industry policy and academic perspectives. So let's start taking the short message from the 4 panelists. Christian, could you please introduce the first speaker?
Yes, Kazu, of course. Thank you very much. And I'm very happy to introduce Lee Rainey, the director of Imagining the Digital Future Center at Allen University. Allen, I think I mispronounced it, apologies. And the Institute Digital Future Center is a research initiative focused on the potential future impact of digital revolution and what may lie ahead. Its mission is to discover and broadly share a diverse range of opinions, ideas, and original research about the likely evolution of digital change, informing important conversations and policy formations. Before that, Lee was founding director of Internet and Technology research at the Pew Research Center, which is a non-profit, non-partisan fact tank that studies the social impact of the internet. He's also been awarded on various occasions for his work, and we're very much looking forward, Lee, to your statement, to your views. You have the floor, Lee.
Thank you so much, Christine. I so enjoyed and learned from Giselle's commentary. And I wanted to start basically by underlining a couple of the things that she said and point out that the best benefits that will come from AI, especially in enabling democracy, will come if the AI systems themselves, the language models themselves, are built on democratic principles, values, and norms. Right now, that's a bit of a challenge, and I think that probably came up a lot in the last conversation that ISSIP sponsored. But we will get the best out of AI systems, and particularly in a pro-democracy way, if they're transparent in all the ways that matter. If they're transparent about the training data that they use, and in the training data they use, they honor the creators who have made the data possible and have made the insights and knowledge possible that provide for the systems of training here. We need to know more about the training process itself, what's fed in, what's queried, whether weights are set and things like that, because it's the only way to stress test these systems, to test the validity of their answers, to figure out how they're hallucinating. We need to know about the validation tests that the companies themselves are using to test the outputs, and to maybe some of the red team activities that are done with the beta testers and things like that. We need explanations or confessions that there are no explanations why hallucinations occur, why bad answers, why bad information is generated by these systems. And we need to know about what the limitations are of these systems, some transparency about the ways in which they function, that they're not all knowing, they're not all universally well prepared and well received in the way of doing things. And I think, knowing a little humility, when good scientists publish their work, they talk about the limitations of their work, and they invite further research on the things that they are not yet sure of, or the things that their work didn't legitimately test. So I underline the fact that democratic principles and values need to be baked into these systems in order for them to serve democracy well. I've been studying the rise of digital technology now for 30 years. And it's been a striking, the word narrative was used, Christine, before, and I love that word, because the narrative has changed. And in some respects, it's a worse narrative now than it was in the early days of the internet. But in other respects, it's a better narrative. So that if you remember back to the dawn of the internet and later the dawn of social media, there was so much almost universal enthusiasm for the ways that would democratize voice and information and insight and input into the world. No longer were the gatekeepers of media going to hold sway over what information, what knowledge, what stories got promoted to society. Everybody could use these tools to tell their story. Different perspectives could be brought to things. Challenges could be made to the gatekeepers of information that ran media systems. There was such incredible enthusiasm for the ways in which democratization would work its magic in the dawn of the internet. The big turning point for that enthusiasm was the rise of social media, particularly in the 2013, 2014, 2015 era, when the Edward Snowden revelations first came out about the way that the security establishment in the United States was sometimes using data to understand what was going on in the world and to monitor people and their threats. Of course, the 2015, 2016 elections in the United States and in the UK were instrumental in driving a techlash. There were all of a sudden, in important ways, there were lots of questions raised about when you give people all of these tools and let them tell their stories, there are ways in which particularly bad actors can manipulate these systems and pump all sorts of bile, all sorts of misinformation, all sorts of toxic sort of information war activities into the system. And that was bad. And we've spent almost a decade now trying to understand all the consequences of that and trying to remedy some of those consequences. But I would argue that one of the good things that we are now prepared to do in evaluating AI is that we have an infrastructure of critics already existing in the world who are skeptical about these systems, who are testing them and challenging their outputs, the sort of highly critical ways in which AI systems are now being evaluated are a result of that techlash from a decade ago, that are the skepticism and wariness about AI systems is now being applied almost in real time to the way these things come out. It's no longer a couple of years before some of the dark side of this material is evident to people. From day one, they are being stress tested and being critiqued, being evaluated for the ways in which they don't perform well, or the ways in which their performance doesn't measure up to the claims of their originators. In a way, this is a testament to sort of human evolution. You know, it takes a while for humans to understand technology, understand the sort of secondary effects of technology, understand some of the problems that technology raises. It's just a lot, you know, an ages-long process in human experience. But in the internet age, we are now shortening the gap between the revelations of, and the revealing of technology and the ways in which people are really applying a skeptical eye and a sort of prove it sensibility to these technologies. So individuals themselves and institutions themselves are evolving in a good way that humans have always done in the world. They're also sort of challenging systems in the way that Giselle, you know, beautifully pointed out, to remedy themselves. And there are, you know, enormous market opportunities as well as enormous democratic opportunities to push back against these systems and to create new products and new systems that make up for the gaps of things. There are also ways now that the kind of values that Giselle was talking about are being brought into these systems entirely. Maybe I'll end my remarks here by talking about the dynamic that I think we're going to see unfolding in the coming years. The boundary between human beings and their machines is going to keep changing and evolving. We use our machines to serve our purposes, but the way in which these machines are evolving poses particularly interesting challenges to humans. They are intelligent in ways that we are not. They can perform in ways that we can't. They are taking over domains of specialty in our species that used to be ours alone, and now there are ways in which the new intelligences are being brought to bear in the world. So the big question that I think is on the table as we watch these things evolve is, what are humans going to continue to contribute to this evolution? What types of intelligence, what types of emotional valence, what types of innovation and enterprise can we bring to these systems, even as they begin to outperform some of the elements of human intelligence? That is the great democratic challenge of the future, and I'm so happy that groups like ISSIP are sort of in the forefront of making sure that we're continuing to talk about these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lee, for this inspiring, even tour the horizon through the last centuries up to the future. And I couldn't agree more with many of the things that you have said. I'm sure we're going to pick it up in the discussion, so bear with us. I'm going to move to our next speaker now, if you allow me. Lee, thanks again. Moving to Ignacio Criado. Ignacio, are you here? I cannot see you at the
Hello,
moment.
how are you,
Hello,
Christine?
hello, Ignacio. Ignacio is a senior lecturer and associate professor at the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid in the Department of Political Science and International Relations. He's also the director of the Research Lab on Digital Government, I would call it in English, if okay, at the university. I've known Ignacio for a very long time, and I know that all his professional life, he has been dealing with digitalization and governance and government. And he has also worked a lot as a consultant in various countries. And he's been visiting academic lecturer at many universities, including University of Oxford, for example. I'm not going to list all of them because otherwise I'm going to, use up all the time for your intervention. He's also author of many books and articles on digital government. And Ignacio, if I'm not mistaken, one of your research focuses has also been the use of social media in governments and how governance has to adapt to the challenges ahead. Ignacio, looking forward to your intervention.
Okay, thank you, Christine, and for the invitation and for this very kind presentation. Well, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everyone who are listening right now. And well, in this 7 minutes period of time that we have, I'm not promising a lot, just I'm going to give you some very broad ideas regarding these challenges that the democracies have regarding artificial intelligence. And as an academic, and here I'm presenting with my hat of academic, I will say that most of the ideas that I'm presenting are based on the first results that we have concerning the research on democracy and artificial intelligence. I'm going to just share with you 3 ideas and one final conclusion or final message. Regarding this interplay between challenges for democracy and artificial intelligence. The first one is something that somehow have been said in the previous presentations, but I don't know if it is clear. And we have what is called the deterministic challenge. And the deterministic challenge is something that I call the idea that technology will have some good or bad outputs. But as other technologies, artificial intelligence is not going to have bad or good outputs without addressing the human and organizational sides of the technology. So it is not, so in my opinion, artificial intelligence and like other technologies are not a mean to get an end. It is also, this kind of technology also shapes the end itself. And some of the discourses that are now coming up regarding artificial intelligence are both or either positive or negative regarding the outputs. And I think we have to look more about the specific capabilities of artificial intelligence. There is a very well-known theory called affordances, or theory of affordances of technology. And here we will see some of the key aspects of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, as we can see right now, is very focused on generative AI, large language models. So it has a very strong connection with language, with communication. So, and this is the reason, because it is the expected results are so pervasive, because communication and language is one of the most human capabilities, and the utilization of artificial intelligence to exploit or to boost or to promote these linguistic capabilities of humans is or could be very pervasive. So this is my first idea. artificial intelligence is not good or bad by itself. It is designed by humans. It also adopted by organizations. So we have to look at the interactions between humans, organizations, and technology. And I think it is important. The second idea that it is connected with this is democracy. We're all talking about democratic values and democracy. And my question here will be, do we have all of us the same notion of democracy? Probably if we had a conversation, an open conversation here, we will ask people about what do you think democracy is, and probably we will have different answers to democracy. Democracy is about elections. Democracy is about freedom of speech. Democracy is about protection of minorities. Democracy it's about following the majority of the population values and requirements. Like for instance, Ortega and Gasset said half a century ago, regarding the rebellion of masses, the idea of who are behind democracy. So I think this is a big question, because not all people have the same idea of democracy. Obviously, I'm not saying just about the situation in which we have in some countries like Venezuela or others who are using or misusing the notion of democracy in these illiberal regimes. The point is, well, what do we have here? What is democracy about? But that we have right now is that the fact that we have is that democracy is about public sphere. This is one of the key aspects of democracy, having a free public sphere. And here we are facing a big challenge, because especially Christine said that I'm a specialist. I've been working on social media for the last 10, 15 years. And I always say that the social media are algorithmic realities. So social media are a clear example that our public sphere is damaged. So we have problems with the public sphere. And democracy needs a healthy public sphere. Micro-targeting social media, deep fakes, they are eroding the public sphere. Polarization as a business of big companies. This is a problem for our democracies. So, well, obviously I'm not getting answers. I'm just giving you questions. And my third and final point is about the role of governments and governments and public administration. So the role of the state. After the COVID-19, we thought that the state came back. We had a big crisis in the world, and all people faced or turned their heads to the state. The state will solve. They will have to find solutions to this, or at least had to lead the solutions. So here, well, we have many states and many governments using artificial intelligence and algorithms, and obviously, well, in different areas: health, education, policy, or security, etc. But the point here is that in some cases, they are using these kind of technologies without looking at the side effects or not expected harms of these kind of technologies. For instance, when police departments are using race or ethnic backgrounds in order as a variable to advance criminality. So this could be will have a side effect in the future. So maybe we have to look for situations in which governments and states can use algorithms and artificial intelligence to improve our societies. to improve public policies. And this is also another aspect that I want to raise, because the design of technologies in governments, in many governments and public administrations, is designed by IT profiles. And some of these profiles are not trained on the social, ethical, and political effects of this kind of technologies. Here, evaluation and assessment of algorithms is a new area in which I think we have to work in the future. And my final message, I think it's not a problem of artificial intelligence itself. This idea of democracy, or the relationship between democracy and artificial intelligence. I think the problem here is that we have to make new questions. And the first question is, for instance, is artificial intelligence going to solve the problem with inequalities in our world, in our countries, among different nations? The second question, what is going to be the role of the state in the age of artificial intelligence? What is the role of the state, and obviously the role of society? And I think this is the kind of question that we have to pose in the future in order to gain the discussion and to have a real impact. Because if we keep business as usual, and we see that we have strong problems with capitalism, probably we will have problems with artificial intelligence and with the future of our democracies. This is all for this moment, and well, I'm very open to your questions in a later stage. Thank you, Christine. Back to you.
Thank you, Ignacio. Thank you for, again, a very comprehensive overview on issues and questions. You've given us a lot of food for thought. I couldn't agree more with some of the points you raised. We'll come back to the discussion later on, so we won't forget. Also, Tim has put some notes in the chat. And I'll hand over at the moment to Kazu to introduce our two other panelists, and then we'll go into the discussions. But thank you again, Ignacio. Thanks for sharing your views, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Ignacio. And next, we invite Jeffrey Borek. Jeffrey is a WW Program Director. It means worldwide Program Director, Open Technology and Supply Chain Security Office for the Cisco at IBM. And he is an experienced technology executive in the software industry, especially has deep insights in open technology and supply chain security. So we are looking forward to have your message, Jeffrey. Floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you, Kazu, and thank you, Christine, for my opportunity here today. Let me go ahead and shift this into presentation mode. I've got quite a bit of information to try and quickly cover with you today. But again, want to acknowledge the JST as well as the ISSIP organization out of London. Happy to be here. And of course, the ISSIP organization. If you want to connect with me, I've listed here my email as well as my LinkedIn profile. I'd like to say that when I talk about open source, I stand on the shoulders of giants. And
Jeff, Jeff, you share the presenter's mode. So
thank you.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Super. Thank you for mentioning that. So I like to say I stand on the shoulders of giants because IBM has a long, proud history of supporting open source back when many organizations had not heard of it, and those that had still had trouble sort of spelling what open source really meant. But as you can see from this slide, and I certainly won't go into the detail, but why has it become so pervasive? And part of this is the concept of the 4 freedoms. But freedom is not free. And open source must be supported effectively. And proof points of this started to surface over the last 5 years in many ways. But one of the main milestones was this executive order on improving the cybersecurity infrastructure. This happened in May of 2000, and it touched on the concept of the supply chain of software. And that will become increasingly more important as the security of that software becomes a front page news item. One other thing that the audience may not fully appreciate, if you think of the pie chart of the modern software supply chain, open source used to be a small fragment of the supply chain up until the last 5 years or so, and it's taken off exponentially. And now open source is about 3/4 of the average modern software supply chain. And yet open source needs to be effectively managed. It's like an asset that is shared and must be balanced effectively and ensure that people are both consuming and contributing to this amazing collection of assets. And I'm very pleased to tell you that the perspective of many large organizations and many governments and NGOs are starting to realize that you can't just think of this as a problem that the commercial sector needs to solve. Open source has become a digital public good that everyone must find appropriate ways to support. And a proof point of this happened just earlier this month at the DEF CON conference in Las Vegas in the US, where the National Cyber Director testified that they would be contributing funds to help bolster the security of open source software and called on more ownership amongst the community. Rebuilding trust in government with responsible AI. IBM IBV, or Institute for Business Values survey, found that many responders believe that government leaders often overestimate the public's trust in them. They also found, interestingly, while the public is still wary about new technology like AI, most people are in favor of government adoption of generative AI. But that issue of trust comes back to the forefront. And this issue was negatively impacted by the pandemic. And one of the things that we collectively face as a large community is that ensuring the safe and ethical integration of AI into our societies and the global economy will be one of the greatest challenges and opportunities for governments over the next quarter of a century. So obviously this is moving very fast, but it will be a marathon as well as it will be a sprint. Recent trends in AI technologies, closed or open. Many have heard the news about the drama around Microsoft and its relationship with OpenAI. But what many don't realize is that OpenAI was founded over 5 years ago as a large not-for-profit that pledged to share openly all of their technology. However, they raised venture capital, which then necessitated that they form a sub-organization that was for-profit. And that for-profit sub-organization is the one that struck the deal with Microsoft. And I won't go into all the interesting drama of the CEO was, quit, and then he was brought back and he was going to be hired. But the net of what is important to realize is that largely that has become a very proprietary entity who may be doing some good things, as was mentioned earlier in today's discussions. But it is something to keep in mind as we move forward. And that is why that they also formed a collective called the Frontier Model Forum. And it's a public policy, arm's length, separate entity, but it is largely populated solely by what I call the hyperscalers, the large compute platforms today that dominate cloud computing. And they make the argument that, oh, well, some regulation may be appropriate, not too much, we'll work with you. But you need our hyperscale platforms to run these large language models. So come to us, we'll keep you safe. And heavens, don't just use open source AI. And that is a very convenient argument if you happen to be one of the very small hyperscale, or one of the very few hyperscalers that has those assets. But it begs the question, what about the rest of society and the rest of the community around AI? And that is why IBM formed an open source alliance with Meta, but also with other tech companies and, importantly, other academic institutions. This was announced in December of last year, and with an initial community of around 50, it's grown to over 100 different entities at this point. But one of the principles of the alliance is to keep a focus on maintaining open AI and AI based on open source, as opposed to allowing this to become a proprietary control point that benefits only a small number of players. And I like this quote from the current head of IBM Research: "The future of AI is open, no matter what some say." Quickly, a couple of additional updates. AI competitors are gathering to collaborate on security. Security is every bit as important of an element, and yet I think it's been somewhat underserved because of others' understandable concerns about AI bias and AI discrimination and other things we talked about earlier in our talk today. But these new types of complex, massive workloads also bring forward security concerns about malware and potential bad actors, and with these complex things that they don't even really fully understand how they work. If you understand how it works, how can you secure it? So IBM and many of the leading players in this space have formed a collaboration under the OASIS Open Standards Organization to try and help create knowledge and common awareness about these issues. And you'll hear more about that as we move into the new calendar year. I'm running over time, so I'm going to quickly wrap up. Some of these benefits we've already talked about in various ways, so I'll pass by this slide briefly, but there is true value in AI supporting democracy. But my final points really come to the idea that open source software has led to great developer freedom, flexibility, and has driven great innovation. And true open source AI will provide consumer freedom so that this does not become a marketplace controlled by one or two global tech giants. And lastly, my question for the audience is, can open source AI equal democracy freedom? I believe it can, but we can't be naive about the fact that this does pose risks such as surveillance bias, deepfakes, and manipulation. So we all have to collectively work together to ensure that this technology benefits society. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's very practical, but very important foundational inputs from your long experiences besides the open source softwares. Thank you very much. Next, let's invite Professor Ito, Takayuki Ito. He's a professor of the Department of Social Informatics, School of Informatics of Kyoto University in Japan. He has tried to implement the consensus building AI agent in Afghanistan, where face-to-face consensus building is often risky in a social climate of a constant ethnic conflict. He had some practical examples envisioning future possibilities. It is not only for the ultimate condition. He will mention about how it will be used.
Okay.
Professor Ito, floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much for a very kind introduction. So I'm Takayuki Ito from Kyoto University. I'm very glad to be here tonight, this morning or this afternoon. So thank you very much. So yes, from this slide. Okay. So actually, my background includes computer science and artificial intelligence and multi-agent systems. That is a distributed artificial intelligence and also collective intelligence. today I'll talk about our current project funded by JST. It's called JST Crest. The title is, as you can see, it's a cloud scale discussion support system based on AI agents. So this slide shows the kind of the whole concept in our project. As you can see in left hand, the current social network has many social problems like fake news and digital gerrymandering, and also filter bubbles, echo chambers, and peer pressures, and other many problems. So therefore, our aim is to solve these problems by using artificial intelligent agent. It's called AI agent. So by using AI agent, the people are supported carefully about the information, and then also facilitate the consensus by these AI agent in our system. So, okay, please next slide. So this is one of our developed system called DAGRI. Here, as you can see, there is one AI facilitation agent. So in the middle, there is an AI facilitation. This is a AI agent we created. So as you can see, the discussion goes like in left side. People can exchange a text message and on the web forum, and then these people try to exchange ideas and also issues and solutions and pros and cons on the web forum. So AI agent observing this discussion and then extract the issues, ideas, and also arguments about these discussions. And then this AI program, AI agent, structurize the semantics of this discussion automatically. So we have this technology by using, we created this AI agent technology by using kind of the old style AI natural language processing technology. So as you can see in this paper that shows in bottom, we got some award, but here the interesting point is this paper was published before ChatGPT. So of course we use the core technology of ChatGPT called the transformer here. This AI agent can extract the semantics from discussion by people very precisely. Okay, please go next slide. So by using this DAGRI system, we did a social experiment in Afghanistan. So here, as you know, in Afghanistan, there are many ethnic groups. These ethnic groups are very kind of the conflicting situation. So ethnic tension in Afghanistan have a long history, and it's worsened by the whole of the government in 2021 when American troops left from Afghanistan. So but here, traditional interaction was challenging, and therefore we explored e-contact approach as an alternative. So what e-contact means is that it's a kind of online contact. It's not like the physical contact. So here, unsupervised e-contact actually can escalate anxiety and also stereotypes. So that means usual online systems cannot be used because the anxiety is very high tension in Afghanistan because they have long history about the conflict. So here, finding a trustworthy human mediator is also very difficult. Therefore, our solution, our proposed solution is to use our conversational AI agent. So here, hypothesis like this. Intergroup ethnic discussion in online platforms which are facilitated by conversational AI agent are more likely to reduce prejudice than unfacilitated online discussions. So this was very challenging, but we did randomized controlled trial in Afghanistan. It's a large-scale experiment. As you can see in method, we gathered randomly 128 Afghans on Pashtun, Tajik, and Hazara backgrounds from the people. And then we measure the intergroup prejudice and anxiety. So then, as a result, as you can see, the participant in groups facilitated by AI agent contribute more ideas and longer opinions, and showed a statistically significant reduction in outgroup prejudice and anxiety than those in the control group. So this is kind of very interesting and very, we believe this is a very important result that shows the AI agent can be the initial trigger to start communication, even communication between the groups, even if they are in the conflicting situation. Okay, so this is a very preliminary experiment, but we showed we gave the evidence about the statistical significance about that. So this is a kind of a very positive way to use AI agent, but we are now extend this experiment more. So as you can see, the result has been published in the communication psychology, that is in the Nature portfolio. Okay, thank you very much. That's all. Shimazu-san, you are off.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry. Thank you very much for mentioning. Let's start discussion now. Today, in order to define our next challenge, we need to move toward a positive goal. Otherwise, there is no point in taking on the challenge. And in that sense, there are many challenges that can be inspired by the concepts and the specific examples presented by keynote speakers and panelists today. Before we discuss how to overcome the challenges, why don't we discuss from various perspectives what challenges we are seeing today? Some from the user side of AI and some from the provider side. I think there is a very common issues presented by the Giselle and Lee and Jeffrey in the view of, what can I say, the openness, transparency is very key in order to improve, in order to find the more good products, service, and opportunities for democracy. And as well, as Ignacio mentioned, AI is a kind of agent tools in order to use it. And so when we consider about how to use it, there are many challenges or issues to be improved towards the future. And as Professor Ito is doing, there's many kinds of approaches, experimental approaches, theoretical approaches from industry side or academic side. So we would like to accumulate a kind of issues we are going to facing. If someone would like to speak out. From
Ray?
okay,
Yeah,
Ray, please.
You're asking me?
Yeah,
Yes.
your hand's raised. We see your hand raised.
Okay, fine. I thank you very much. I've certainly enjoyed these last four commentaries, and I'm especially intrigued with Jeffrey's comment about the issue of can open source equal democracy freedom. That to me seems to be particularly important as a goal. AI is clearly going to be much more powerful than social media, and if it's used well, we could maybe get there. But I would love to hear further thoughts on what it would take to get there, to get to democracy freedom, as opposed to the mess we otherwise will create for ourselves.
Well, I will take a stab at that meaty question. Thank you. In some ways, one metaphor we can think of is the evolution of transportation in the form of, roads, highway systems, and eventually freeways. In the early days of the automotive, there's a tremendous amount of chaos. And over time, standards got established and people figured out how to navigate. And we ended up with infrastructure that's vital to today's society. The question we have in front of us with AI is, how do we try and secure that? And if you think about that metaphor I'm using, some propose that, oh, well, we've got to completely err on the side of caution. And imagine a interstate or a freeway system where every 2 or 3 miles you had to go through checkpoints and you had to step out of your vehicle and have it searched. Finding the right balance to regulate this impactful new technology is certainly one element of it, but the open source angle for me is even more important, because with the chance of this being proprietary, again, it concentrates that power. And what time has proven again and again is that power corrupts when power is centralized. And so I think open source represents the best path for AI technology to be democratized and to allow democracy to flourish. But again, it won't be an easy task. It will take engagement on the parts of many different players to try and ensure that that happens.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Is there any other comments or thoughts on the issues we are facing?
I have a question for Jeffrey as well. So in the open source community, fierce competitors collaborate. What's the magic there?
A couple of thoughts. One, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And when an entity like OpenAI creates a impressive breakthrough, but at the same time violates a trust that was established when they formed a non-for-profit and pledged, even by their very brand name, to be OpenAI, and yet they've gone proprietary. And so when that happens, one of the things that's not actually very common, but you can think of it as a pressure relief valve in open source communities, is the concept of a fork. So as long as the code is available and shared and follows the 4 freedoms, then if an entity driving that code development starts to take it in a direction that the community disagrees with, a fork can be created. It's not easy to do, but open governance and having projects under a shared governance model is a key element of collaboration. And really another thing on the positive side that drives it is that a rising tide economically floats all boats. And unlike the old days of IT, when IBM was a mainframe company that had kind of cornered the market and nobody got fired for buying IBM, today IBM is very committed to open technologies and benefits because it's part of an open ecosystem and it has the opportunity to compete in the marketplace in a fair and balanced way.
Right.
Jim, the other thing I would add to that, yeah, it's so wonderful to hear Jeffrey talk. In the best open source situations, it's sort of adversarial collaboration. If the thing works, there, wherever it came from gets embraced by the community. It's not that you're getting along, and it's not like you have to forge an agreement about one thing or another. You've got the fork option and things like that, but it's the test is effectiveness and the test is workability rather than are you coming to a consensus solution or something like that.
Yeah, the key thought there is meritocracy. And meritocracy, I think, is a very valid descriptor. It's been somewhat bruised in the last 10 years because you had meritocracy is like the Linux kernel. And in open source, there's a phrase called the BDFL. That's the benevolent dictator for life. And Linus Torvalds in the Linux kernel is kind of the BDFL. Unfortunately, because of some of his shortcomings a decade ago, that on the negative side brought forward this issue of, hey, it can't just all be about the merits of a single technical argument. You have to also incorporate human factors and bring in diversity. And, that's another interesting element of how open source communities work. And the big challenge I'll just make my final comment on as we run up against the clock is that open source as a high level concept, everyone goes, oh yeah, free software, check the box, move on. I see it even within my own large organization at very senior levels. It's only when you roll up your sleeves and reach in and get your hands dirty and work in some of these ecosystems that you start to appreciate just how complex and nuanced they can be, and how they're constantly at risk for not being sustainable because only a small percentage of the people that do open source actually are sponsored by companies. Many of them are developers that do it part-time or do it based upon a startup or for other reasons.
Thank you. Please allow me to get a final comment from Ignacio and Ito Sensei. Ignacio, do you have any comments or final words?
Well, no, thank you so much for the opportunity, and just let's keep this conversation on democracy and artificial intelligence. And obviously, if you want to ask me something about the different types of democracy that we have in theory, in theoretical political thinking, well, just I will be very glad to keep in touch.
Okay, thank you. Ito Sensei.
All right. So I'm glad to be here very much. So thank you very much for many kind of interesting talk. So my concern is one final comment from me is that I think the structure of the democracy will be changed by AI effect. I think even open source community. I think the people are going to use the AI technology in communication. That makes that interaction very different, I think. So how we can think about such future is very important. How to make that structure better for the society is, I think, important. So this is my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ito Sensei. Christine, final words.
Final words. No, let me thank you all for this Very, very interesting and very comprehensive. There's so many issues that I don't know what to focus on, but it could go back to my initial statement. I'm interested in particular, the role of regulation. I've heard it, I don't know, from many of you, that regulation is relevant to find the right balance. Also, Ignacio, the role of the state, and to need to think about democracy. What kind of democracy are we looking at? I think there's a lot of food for thought and a lot of work on that, because we have these controversial discussions on over-regulation in the EU. But then again, I hear all the time, we need regulation. So for me, this is still a big question mark. And one thing that I didn't hear today, but I think it's extremely important in that whole discussion, is the role of education when it comes, to democracy, interaction and communication. So I'd like to hear more about these two aspects, but this was such a rich debate, and I'd like to follow up with all of you individually. And again, many thanks for taking the initiative, Kazu and Michelle and Jim. Was happy to join. Thank you all.
Thank you, Christine. I will summarize today's discussion and reach to you all, Lee, Jeffrey, Ignacio, and Ito Sensei later. So please keep in touch. Michelle, back to you.
Simply to say thank you to all these excellent panelists, and to Kazu and to Christine and Jim for identifying them and bringing you all together. This was, as Christine said, a very rich and worthy conversation. The third and final event is September 25th, Wednesday the 25th, same time. And the survey is in the chat. Please do it. And actually, let me just quickly, Christine mentioned education. The PSU collaboration industry transformation series is next week, August 28th, which is digging into the education sector transformation underway. And on that one, Jim, I don't know if you want to say a word, but he will be co-moderating that panel.
Yeah, it's next Wednesday, and stay tuned. We will be diving into AI and its transformative effect on education. So I'll be seeing some of you next week for that.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much for joining, all of you, HSSE community. Thank you. See you soon. Thank you, Nat.
Thank you,
Bye.
Christine. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank